Hello,
Hello,
and
Robyn.
hello, Stephen. Welcome to our weekend Wonkette live chat. How are you this week? Happy Father's Day.
Thank you. I am well. Looking forward to a pleasant, muggy, gray Portland day. So it is supposedly June. I always forget out here, but at least it's, as people tell me, at least it's not 120 degrees like it was
True,
last year.
true.
So I guess we could start with you have been covering some of the negotiations, as it were, with the gun bill, and Republican support has been wavering, and what you'd comment about the type of stuff that gets in a Republican supported bill that
Well,
Joy Reid gave the big
I know I'm so
to.
fancy now.
Yeah. So do you mind taking us through the very good point you made?
Well, the whole thing is that the only thing the Republicans are going along with and saying, okay, we'll allow this in our bill to address mass shootings have to do with the narrative that they have wanted to create about who is a danger and who is responsible for mass shootings. We know that as much as I do believe that we need so much more funding than even this bill is giving to mental health care, they're trying to conflate those two things in a way that is some bullshit because they don't want to actually discuss the reasons why a lot of these people are going on these murder sprees. And it's because they're racist and they think that, oh no, people are replacing us.
Well,
Like invasion
psychopathic
of the body
behavior,
snatchers.
and you've made this point, like psychopathic behavior or just general antisocial personality disorder, which often leads to criminal and violent behavior, is not sort of mental like, and any of us who've had experience with mental illness and people who have, it's totally different. Not mentally ill people are not necessarily the ones shooting up schools. And you've written about the fellow in Colorado, right? Like he was
Yeah.
not.
Well,
He,
here's
yeah.
the thing. He wasn't found guilty, not guilty by reason of insanity. He was in fact schizophrenic. He was diagnosed as that. I believe either before or after. I know at least his psychiatrist thought he might have some sort of schizoid personality disorder. Um, there's a reason why these people are not getting off as like not guilty by reason of insanity, and that is because they're not doing this specifically because they are crazy.
Mhm.
I hate that word, but I'm not trying to be ableist here. I do in fact have my own issues. So um, no, they're trying to create a narrative where it's not the guns, it's just these crazy people who, by some fluke of nature get a hold of these guns and then they go and murder people. It's not our people. It's not the people who are listening to us. It's not, angry white men who think they're being replaced or rejected by women, which it is in fact that mostly.
Yeah, there's a lot of anger. I mean, Lauren Bobart, who's a woman, and
Mhm.
Marjorie the Green. These folks often present full on Ray. I mean, even being on Twitter, when we were speaking with our friend Claire about like angry white men on Twitter and how they respond, and I've gotten nowhere near as much as any woman would have, but the response, like when a woman is dares to disagree with them, the heated anger and intensity, and these are, to again use this term, normal people. They would not register as mentally ill, but a lot of it's just a sense of how dare you insult me, how dare you
Yeah,
disagree with
and
me,
that's not
and
mental illness. That's not hate is not a mental illness.
they
It's
just
not. And it's
want to make it so that wanting to stockpile all these guns is in any way healthy mental behavior in general. So when Lauren Bobart has the shrine to guns behind her, and at a work meeting, and in normal worlds, if at a work meeting, that would be weird, right? You'd be like, oh my God.
yeah,
You know, like, and the fetishism of guns that
I just
Republicans
have booze. No,
the
and you have
fetishism
musicals.
of guns that Republicans have encouraged or embraced, they can't now suddenly agree that is a problem. So they try to make it to it's like there's a clear.
Well, it can't be the guns that are at fault. It can't be the fact that, we have guns that can kill 30 people in 5 seconds. Like that, no, can't be that. Can't have anything to do with that. And we have to, they want to move the conversation from that, from the fact that, maybe these people should not, maybe literally no one should have access to these kinds of weapons that can do that. Because, there's no actual use for them outside of going on a mass murder spree. They want to, they don't want to, they'd rather stigmatize the mentally ill than gun owners, responsible gun owners who somehow always, end up leaving their loaded guns around so that their toddlers can shoot themselves or their neighbors.
And along those lines, and this is coming from folks like Fred Gutenberg and Shannon Watts, and they lovely people. They've done great work. But there is a sense amongst, I would say, more likely suburban white activists for gun who would be like, well, the best thing in the world is to unseal those juvenile records and make sure that those folks don't get guns. And
it's horrifying. It's not good.
And Representative Ocasio-Cortez had expressed concerns about that. And I think there was some very intense, unfortunately, from Gutenberg, very intense. You're wrong for even disagreeing with this idea. And I'm going to tell you why you're wrong. So it's not even structured as a discussion of like, well, why are you concerned about this or thinking it will do harm? Because that's her position. Like this will do more harm than good. And their sense of like, you're just standing in the way of positive ways to keep guns out of the hands of people. I hate guns. I'd be fine if no one having guns, but I guess you put it, it won't end there. Can you tell us a bit about your concern with this?
It's a really, really big civil liberties issue in general. It is very important that juvenile records remain sealed, that expunged records remain sealed. This is a very, very basic and important thing we are talking about here. Like, it's not like, oh, we'll give up a few civil liberties in order, in exchange for safety. That'll be cool. It's not just going to stop there. And I mean, I personally don't think that there should even be juvenile records to begin with. I think that's pretty horrifying. The US is number 1 in the world in terms of both incarcerating youth and incarcerating, charging and incarcerating youth as adult offenders. So we're not doing great here already. It's a bad situation. And the thing is, barely any of these mass shooters have records or, any criminal history, because most of them come from the suburbs where it's not being constantly policed. And what it is it's, again, Republicans trying to set up who it is they think is a danger. And it's people with criminal records, most of whom, let's be real, live in areas where the police are going around, i.e. people of color. And so that is why Ocasio-Cortez said that it was racist, because that is the intent of it. That is the actual intent. The reason they are agreeing to it is because they don't think it will be applied to white kids from the suburbs. They wouldn't agree to it otherwise.
And I think there is a suburban bias that those kids are, obviously those kids would be discouraged, anyone with a juvenile record. If you grew up watching, I mean, all of us, like the propaganda, if you watch it, it's always like as some juvenile, oh, we unsealed their juvenile record at 16 and this girl had killed everyone in her dorm, something like that. Like it was always some sort of crazy, violent thing in their past that was left unsealed. So there's this ticking time bomb going around, making the rules seem crazy. So you think of it, go, no, people should have known before they let her work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And, so I see the point where it wouldn't stop there. Like, then it's like, well, why? Well, wouldn't we want to know when the student is in my kid's school if they have?
Background checks aren't just for guns. They're not just even for arresting people. They are for work. They are for a variety of things. They are for charging people with they're also for like charging people with crimes, even though technically you can't admit prior bad acts. Certain things can go to show pattern, and it's a way of being able to convict people you really should not be able to convict. And I'm sorry if that's upsetting to people who are like, let's just throw them all in prison, it'll be fine. But no, it's a really, really, really not okay violation of civil liberties, and it's going to affect not the people who are actually committing these crimes, but the people Republicans would like to pretend are a danger.
Well, and Republicans are pretty consistent. Like it always bugs me when often on the left we will accuse them of being hypocritical or inconsistent. It's like there's a very consistent pattern in their sort of ideology, and who they are singling out, as you say, it's amongst their base. So here, the idea of unsealing juvenile records, because of it will impact people who don't vote for them or they believe are quote unquote bad people. Whereas you had written last week, I think Thursday or Friday, about the red flag laws that they are pushing back against, and the boyfriend loophole. That to me is like, it's not hypocritical. It's like, well, no, the reason they're talking about due process on this is that is more likely to impact people who vote for Republicans, like violent men.
And it also very specifically takes the teeth out of very specific parts of the bill if you get rid of it. And so right now, you can be barred from having a gun for pretty much any felony, like nonviolent drug felonies, welfare fraud, all kinds financial fraud crimes that are nonviolent, as long as they're felonies. The only time a misdemeanor is counted really is when it's domestic violence, and it's not counted if it's the person's they're not married, they're not living together or having a kid together. Sorry, just let me organize my thoughts for a second. A little ADHD moment there. So, sorry, I just completely blanked on what I was even saying. Okay, so the boyfriend loophole, it makes it clear that misogyny is one of the very most indicative traits of these mass shooters. And conservatives don't like that because they need to promote the idea that hate does not cause harm. Sexism does not cause harm. It's harmless when we do these things. It's harmless when we attack gay people, when we attack women, when we attack people of color. It's harmless. And that is also why they want to take the focus off of who is actually committing these crimes. So a big reason why they don't want the boyfriend loophole, even though it's clearly more indicative of someone who's going to go on a murder spree than someone who committed welfare fraud, is because they don't want mass shootings associated with misogyny or,
And it's interesting because I don't think Paul Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver, had done a lot of research into this, or if there was even research in the mid-70s. But what always, I think, is so prescient about Taxi Driver is that pattern. If you watch it, it's about a guy who's constantly rejected by women. He gets the girl on this date, Sybil Shepherd. She rejects him because he's not, all there. Not to use the ableist term, but he's obviously an unhinged person. And he becomes so enraged that is what causes him to go on, I need to get guns. It goes violent. And his intent to assassinate the senator in this film has nothing to do with any sort of political or theme or anything other than I just want to hurt someone because she works on his campaign. I want to take something from her. But it's all rooted in misogyny. Everything, part of it is his hatred for women who reject him. And that's the through line of his motivations and everything. And everything's sort of ancillary, like the idea of the political assassination or his sort of contempt for minorities, because that's also there when he talks about the animals in the streets and everything. But the through line is all misogyny. And that's sort of every manifesto, these guys, that's sort of the through line of is misogyny. I mean, there will be racism.
Well, there's always, in almost every single one of these cases, it is predicated by a situation where there is violence towards women, there is outright misogyny, there is, what they call creepy behavior, like stalking women, making women feel uncomfortable. Like there's every single time this is what happens. We know it. We've seen this pattern. You've like every single time one of these things, we get in a mass shooting. A few days later, what do we hear? We hear from women that he spoke to or knew who he was harassing, calling obsessively or violent towards, or, oh, he flipped out because a woman rejected him. I mean, we had not a mass shooting, but a woman was just like slaughtered in a Walgreens, a 16-year-old girl, I'm sorry, by a 29-year-old man who worked there and was mad that she rejected him.
Oh, yeah.
Like, these things are very, very clearly related, but the Republican Party can't have them be related because then the shit that they do is perhaps wrong.
And it's unfortunate. I mean, and we can probably discuss this as well, all the sort of transphobia that's out there. But if you look, I mean, trans women specifically being targeted in all these bathroom bills, if they are the threat, whether or not these women are the ones being, targeted or whatever. But often if you look at the pattern of when these women are victims of violence from men, they always fit the same, what you said, that pattern of stalker behavior. It is not essentially the pattern of if a man were to shoot me or beat me up or attack me. It's a very different thing. And it's this irony of where, no, they are women because they are fitting the violence inflicted upon them fits the same patterns. And when people like Rowling or others then tries to deny that of them and instead try to paint them as predators, it's really, to me, horrific because it's very clear. Like,
oh yeah, it's very clear who the victims are here. For like the past few weeks, they've been conservatives have also been like releasing videos of themselves screaming at drag queens, and they've just been really, really, really ramping this shit up. And I absolutely, they were doing it prior to the spate of shootings, but they're doing it a lot more after. And sure, that could have something to do with pride, but they're also very much trying to do a look here, don't look here thing. Like, oh, look, we totally care about kids because we're going to pretend that these people are pedophiles and then yell at them about it.
Well, the best way is to present them, and we've discussed this in the past. So there is that sort of, the extent that there is sort of a libertarian bent amongst some non-ideological voters, it's like, well, I'm not an obsessive Christian. I don't let people do whatever they want. You get a lot more gain if you say children are at risk. It's not about consenting adults, it's about children, or they're grooming children, or they're converting children. And that gets Christopher Rufo, who came up with the idea of making critical race theory the default for everything, even said, like, instead of drag queens, which sounds harmless, call them trans strippers, because that makes the left have
no sense.
But then you have to explain that it's not strippers. You've already had the image in the head. And this is Nazi propaganda. I think what a friend of mine, Charles, had pointed out, it's like, it's not a matter of what's right. It's like clearly Nazi propaganda style, where it puts the image in the person's head. So then we have to get that image out of their head, but it's already too late. And it's all based on that lie. So when people are coming out talking about something I was writing for Monday, Carrie Lake, who's running for. I'm
glad you're taking that.
She had the friend who, and I respect this,
was an actual drag queen.
Yeah, who came forward of like, and I've performed at her house with children present, because yes, a drag queen performing is not scary. It doesn't scar children. We've been friends. They were close enough. I think she shared text where where Carrie Lake was like, "Hey, you looking for a roommate?" And what she's done is just basically, Lake has, jumped overboard on idea of like, attacking queer people during
Well,
Pride.
because it's working for them, they think.
Oh yeah.
However, I do not think it's going to work for them for very long. Like, this is a really, really, hi Darren. This is a really, really, they have a very short leash on this, I think, just because everyone's seen this movie before at this point, and they're making themselves look ridiculous. And I'm not saying it's not harmful, but they're making themselves look ridiculous.
Yes, I mean, attacking in Pride, there was a sense where Republicans were almost like corporations were saying, "Hey, happy Pride," and even while they were doing anti-queer stuff on the background, now they're
Yeah.
attacking queer people during Pride. I think that has been escalated a bit when Lake had tweeted, which is the reason her friend Barbara Seville, and which is a wonderful
Agreed.
but also it's I was repeatedly seeing Barbara misspelled. I think a drag queen would probably spell Barbara a specific way.
Yeah.
So my advice to the media for anyone, 9 times out of 10, that will be spelled like. They Lake had tweeted like, they've taken God out of the schools and put in drag queens. They've taken the flag out.
God has been out of schools for many, many years now, legally, because it's in the freaking Constitution. Mm-hmm. No, you don't get to have God in schools. I'm sorry, unless you send your kids to private school. That's the law. Sorry, bitch. Like,
and I get pushback for saying I'm blaming Democrats, but Democrats are also supposed to be protecting these marginalized groups. That is their value proposition, right? And I think there was some interview, Financial Times, with Hillary Clinton, and and I don't believe she was necessarily throwing towards people on the bus. It was just the person was spinning it, the writer, as at the Financial Times, not surprisingly, of like, well, what's the good of calling J.K. Rowling a fascist, which no one is. They're just saying she's a billionaire who spends her time attacking women. And she wants to say that she is not attacking women because she's attacking different women. If she was just saying, I'm a feminist, but I hate, Black women and Latino, women who aren't white, which arguably there's some of that in her work as well. Considering she couldn't come up with a name for a Chinese character. That was how about Chang? Like, that's Chef Boyardee for our Italian, just random stuff. But so
his name actually was Boyardee. That guy. I'm sorry that I know that.
So she is she's a bad actor. She uses her platform to hurt people who are marginalized, and that's worth pointing out. But to diminish it, and Hillary's response was, nothing else matters except protecting democracy, which the problem with this is that it doesn't imply that, and this happens a lot, and Carville has done it, and others has done it, as if it is trans people who are just trying to live, or queer people who are just trying to live, who are coming out and saying, hey, look at me, whatever. No, like the libs of TikTok thing, which targets.
Yes, and then directing hatred and violence towards people. And we're supposed to be in charge of standing up for those people always. Like, that is the whole. If we don't do that, then what is the point of us?
I'm sorry if it's deemed as inconvenient. So it's viewed as that, the marginalized people are inconvenient to Democratic, because
they're blowing up our spot.
If we don't, if we didn't have to deal with all this, quote unquote identity politics, everyone would vote for us because of our wonderful bills that Manchin and Sinema won't let pass. And that is the difference, because people were bringing up 2004 when Bush campaign specifically used the threat of same-sex marriage, putting on the bill to turn out from white evangelicals in key states. But the difference was Bush, was desperate. His campaign was in a, 2004, things were necessarily Iraq was kind of going to hell and everything, So to me, it says a lot. This isn't a distraction. So Democrats who think again, and even Buttigieg has hinted at this, and I think it's a Democratic idea to say that when Republicans attack queer people or marginalized people in general, it's like it's a distraction from their lack of policies. No, their policies are bigoted. Their
Yes.
goal is to create white Christian supremacy. That's their jam.
They're
And
saying it fairly openly now. Like, it's not like, oh,
yeah,
these are just some extremists within our parties, within our party. That is what they are actually running on. There's that lady running on Jesus Guns Babies. Like,
yeah, and you don't have to, if you're just sort of playing for, all this four-dimensional chess, you don't actually have to do that when inflation's at 8.4%.
yeah,
Gas is like $6 a gallon. Like, Democrats are behind the eight ball legitimately. You could run on, this is all bad, we're going to make it better. You don't have to beat up on trans people. You don't have to pass these bills unless you want to.
yeah.
It's what they want. It's not a distraction. It's specifically their objective. And so as a party, Democrats have to say, we are the party of protecting these marginalized people. And that means we have to be upfront about this. And it's interesting, when I had said before, one challenge of leadership was not particularly having quote unquote skin in the game. And I was sent all these videos of Nancy Pelosi from 1986 and so forth, or Dianne Feinstein, just and the conspiracy theories.
These people were great before you were born, people.
Well, now, yeah, the conspiracy theories. Like, someone's just like, well, the only problem you have with Dianne Feinstein is that she's an inconvenient woman. You just want to remove her to put someone in younger. And it's like, what? No, like, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's just that she is overtly not, at this point in time, actively part of helping fight the battle we're having now. It's like, well, what about, Mitch McConnell is 1,000 years old, and so is Chuck Grassley. But yeah, but they are like evil, overtly evil. They're not sitting around saying like, oh, I miss the days when we could, hang out with our Democratic peers, and I wish the Democratic Party would be awesome again. It's like, no, they are full on Tea Party. They've got the jam. It's like Mitch McConnell's
And the tiny cucumber sandwiches, which
I know Mitch McConnell is like he's the record executive in the mid 90s who's wearing flannel. He's like, yeah, whatever you guys want, I'm into this. I'm into grind now. But whatever it is. And finally Furthermore of like, no, I think that, nice 60s pop is going to come back. It's like, well, I don't think it will. So yeah, I mean, it is very important that we actually show that we can protect marginalized groups. They're the ones at most.
Whenever we do drop the ball on these things, whenever we do, agree to their premises and just like, okay, well, we'll agree to this premise that they're throwing out here. And absorb it into our own way of thinking and not go too crazy on certain things. It never works out for us. Like, we are never rewarded for it, not once. And in fact, half the time we end up getting punished. Before they went on this like full on we hate gay people bonanza, back when Trump was running, they absolutely loved getting to say, we have the first president who's for same-sex marriage. We are really, and they loved being able to do that. They loved being able to lie and say that he was against the Iraq War when he was not in the beginning. Every time we drop the ball on things that like we actually should be taking care of, or people we should be embracing and protecting, it never works out for us. Like, there are no thank you notes.
And the Texas GOP had their platform referring to homosexuality as an abnormal lifestyle. And there's some Republicans, Tim Miller, Bulwark, who's gay, has a family, and that's all lovely. But he was stunned by, and a lot of Republicans, often the ones who had left with Trump, were like, this is horrifying, whatever. And I'm like, well, okay, the anti-queer agenda of the Republican Party didn't start with Trump. In fact, the perception was that Trump was going to be too liberal on queer rights.
Yeah.
Because he was from New York and they can really trust him. It's why Mike Pence, who suddenly, people are sillily making a hero, was, brought on a ticket because he was crazy anti-gay. And this idea that this only happened with Trump is something that I think some Democrats are being too easy on Republicans, allowing.
Did they not see the entire Bush era?
Oh yeah, it was very clear.
And the Obama era. Like, the only reason they sort of flipped for a minute was because they get behind Trump no matter what he does. Like, it doesn't really matter if he says things they agree with or not.
Yeah, I knew a lot of queer people and trans people who were rooting for Trump over Ted Cruz because they feared because Cruz was so in your face. He was, over to the point where I don't think he's so terrible that no one really defines him by his anti-queerness anymore. But that was a big thing when he was running. So he was perceived as very scary in ways that Trump was not. Whereas what I would always say is, well, that might not be his jam, but he will sacrifice anyone.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So he's not an ally. He might not be attacked, but he's gonna, when it's convenient, throw you to the lions, and that, of course, is
exactly what happened.
So it is pretty clear. I mean, Republicans are very clear on getting what they want. What they want is they're going to, banning abortion. It's going to be very hard to get reproductive freedom. Is just will be taken off the table. Making life very miserable for queer people, specifically trans people, and just chasing them out of the public sphere to the extent that they've been part of the public sphere. And when, going back to Carrie Lake, when she was herself in drag, she was dressed as Elvis in one of the photos, that idea of this is a fun thing, like drag, like and I'll always, people, these are human beings who volunteer to spend their personal time reading to children and sharing something that they do. And if you are, and this is fairly one of the radicalizing moments for Marjorie Green, that she was so offended by that because she's an evil human being. Like,
and let's be clear, they also hate reading.
Yeah, she was like, there's something awful. It's all of this stuff is evil that is happening. And so she feels like she has to like slap it down. And so I found that like the attack on these folks, it's like, if we give ground, there's this idea that we take that off the table. If we just let these people, rain hell, we can then run on all our wonderful moderate domestic agenda. And that doesn't work, especially now when things are kind of not particularly very great domestically. So we really need to sort of just say, so, and also if you're running, I get so many fundraising emails about democracy on the ballot and all that. If that's democracy, well, that includes queer people's right to exist. And I think one thing that's probably not resonating with a lot of normal, quote unquote, normal voters is when you keep talking about democracy, but it's more of a sense of a lack of civility is what you're really saying, which they don't quite get. They're like, what? Like the cucumber sandwich era is ending? All right. And, I'd written about the lady, QAnon, first Mexican-born woman elected to Congress who, flipped a seat in a 86% Hispanic district in Texas. And I was told, don't worry about that. Democrats weren't even trying. I'm just like, okay. It's like, we'll win later, which is all right. But she's in Congress now, and she's for the big lie, and it's harder to read. You probably should have gotten rid of her the first time, like not like, okay, later. It's like a political agenda. It's almost kind of as lazy and out of it as Brad Pitt in True Romance. It's like on the couch, stoned, and be like okay, we'll get to it later. It's so. But there is a significant amount of working class Hispanic Americans who just aren't, whatever we are selling them is not, they're not buying. And, you know, if you go back, Robyn, to like 2016, what were we told? What was the theory? The theory was that Trump's overt and hostility towards immigrants, calling Mexicans rapists, is like, that's over. Not only will Republicans never win Florida again,
Oh
but
yeah, I remember that.
and obviously that's not happened. And we are losing ground with Hispanic voters. And it was clear during the primaries that Biden was having trouble with Hispanic voters. And there was soft performance. We still obviously won the demo, but soft performance compared to Clinton, and definitely Obama. Obama was doing like 71% against Romney.
Yeah.
And we were down to like 60%. And so it's clearly an issue that we are not addressing. So it's sort of, I think it is a lot, it's a balance, right? So there's, you have to protect marginalized people, but also there are people who are just like, look, what's most important is I need to be able to fill up my gas tank and not go broke.
Oh, absolutely. But here's the thing. There's no economic justice without social justice, and there's no social justice without economic justice. These aren't separate things as much as, people in 2016 really tried to separate them. They're not. It's not, either we can take care of, make sure that trans people aren't oppressed, or, we can get rid of at-will employment. Both of those things can be true. And like, it doesn't have to be a one or the other situation, and acting like it is a little bullshitty.
Well, yes, it's been you've touched upon this. It was very unfortunate. And I think because of the tenseness over 2016, there was no real self-reflection. And I feel like often, and to be blunt, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton won because the Democratic Party was like, okay, we keep getting our asses kicked. What are we going to do? And we can't it wasn't like, no, Dukakis was so goddamn sexy in that tank. And if voters didn't see it, they didn't thirst, it's their fault. And they're all a bunch of racists, was not going to help you beat Bush in 92. They had to be like, there was a movement to sort of shift and change the party. That was from the middle, it was the third way. And so there wasn't, after, to me, a complete disconnect. When you have Chuck Schumer saying in Pennsylvania, when, despite what was happening in the primaries of Sanders, despite Trump's, quote unquote populist rise, he was saying, no problem, because for every, working class Democrat we lose, we're going to gain, 2 Republicans in the suburbs, which didn't happen. It was wrong. And it was fundamentally wrong and flawed. And there was no sense of, okay, well, you don't know anything. Let's change our policies and figure out what to do. Instead, it was just every Trump voter was racist. There was economic anxiety, didn't exist. They really weren't concerned about economic issues. It was all racism and all sexism. Even though you've written about, yes, you've never been the liberal who's been like, oh yeah, racism and sexism doesn't exist. It's only economic issues. You just said. So you got to acknowledge the issue.
Honestly, I feel like those people are largely a figment of certain people's imaginations, because I've been on like the far left forever, and I like, while absolutely I have met my share of manarchists, and I will tell you that I can, I've got some stories. It's not, I don't really think that is as much of a thing as people were trying to claim it was, because there are so many feminists and so many people of color involved, and who have been involved for years in, trying to change the way things are done economically in this country. And I feel like it's like insulting, really. to suggest that like, oh, well, you can't both want health care for everyone and be a feminist. That would just be foolish. You just want health care for the boys. Whatever, freaking Gloria Steinem. I do not care for Gloria Steinem. There, I said it.
Yes. Well, there's a
did
sense.
You see the thing this week? Did you see the thing this week?
Which
Where
thing?
she was like, we should turn Rikers Island into a prison for women. Feminism. I don't.
Huh? I should. That makes no sense. But okay.
No, it does not.
Well, there's a lot of kind of, and to put in sort of music terms, Reneva's terms, it's just like, how dare you not get that the Beatles are the biggest thing in the world? How dare you like any music now? So you don't really like music. So like young, you're not a young feminist if you disagree with Gloria Steinem, or if you disagree with like the say, or if you were to dare refer to them as the establishment, even though they have a lot of power. And it wound up being this whole thing of where I would see like, how dare, this, white factory worker who might not necessarily connect with a former first lady who was a senator and then secretary of state. His only reason he's not connecting with her is because he's a racist and a misogynist. And you can take that approach, sure, but it is not, I don't see how constructive it is.
I will tell you, I don't deny that there is a whole lot of sexism and a whole lot of racism. I also think that people contain multitudes. And yeah, like people weigh their options. And if you're not, you have to, give something for everyone if you want, to get that kind of support. You can't say, well, no, we don't have anything for you this time, but we'll get to you later. And that is an attitude that has absolutely done a disservice for, like, the Democrats have done themselves a disservice by doing that, not just to those people, but also to, people of color, to women, to gay people. It's always like, wait your turn. It'll happen.
No.
Just, we're totally on this. Wink, wink.
And it's not always consistent, right? So if you look at, okay, well, we have electoral college. The only way you're going to win is to win the Rust Belt, and most likely whichever Democrat has to win Wisconsin, for example, whoever is most Wisconsin. So if I'm saying, oh, well, look, I'm sorry, Robyn, you're too far left or too feminist to win there. So we need this, me, the Wall Street black man, is going to win there. You'd be like, I don't think you're any more likely to win Wisconsin, Wall Street black man. And it's like, oh, well, you're a racist, just seems to be a bias. Like, first I'm saying, like and to be more specific, there was a lot of people making that argument about Warren. And that could be true. Like that as a woman, specifically, she was going to have trouble in those areas. Fine. But then they would suddenly say, well, my preferred candidate is going to win there.
Yeah, except
then I would point out those problems, and they would be like, oh, no, we need to go to Wisconsin and browbeat them and say, how dare you not vote for my preferred black woman candidate? And that, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense, because you have to deal with the electorate you have, right? But I'm sorry, you were saying.
Oh, no, I was just saying, I brought this up before, but that debate where she did really, really well, and the CNN people were all like, she may have done well, but is it going to go over with the people in Iowa? Like, they want, that's Iowa people. They'll never go for that. Freaking Anderson Cooper. And then they go to the panel of people from Iowa, almost to a person. They were, asked who they wanted and who they liked best. Almost all of them said Warren. A huge majority. I think it was like 12 people. 10 of them said they liked Warren. One said they thought Bernie won, and the last one was like, no, I like Joe Biden. And that is really how that turned out. And then they pan back to Anderson Cooper and whomever, and they're just like, we're going to go to commercial now. That
And
was surprising. And it's this idea that, like, people from these areas are some mysterious monolith and probably all wearing flannel. Like, I don't, you know, under normal circumstances, I live in the Midwest. I'm quite radical, as is like most people that I know. And yes, I live in Chicago, but still, this idea that, I don't think that you can necessarily say, I know what this group of people wants in a way that, like, belies, like, in a way where you're not actually listening to them. You're just going off of stereotypes that exist in your own head.
yeah,
Like,
I mean, to me, it's about. I mean, I look at polling data. I look at certain what people might what resonates with certain people. So I don't know if you can definitely change everything within a year. So if a candidate is not connecting with these people, how is that going to change? And definitely saying that you're a bunch of racists or sexist, that's why you don't get my candidate, is not going to change things either. It's I'd written about this last week because there's a Times article. I was apparently not supposed to write about it because you're sort of the New York Times is some sort of radical like it's run by Ocasio-Cortez or something. And it's, I was like, well, it might be relevant if David Axelrod is like giving quotes to the New York Times about his concerns about Biden. That's actually important. And I don't think that, my limited following commenting on the New York Times article is somehow going to give more focus to the New York Times. I think the New York Times does all right without me.
yeah.
Just sort of saying, like, look, and my perspective had always been, it's interesting. Some people that, oh, well, you're just leaping on this, so you want Bernie to run because I've been recast as Bernie supporter. And I never voted for the guy. I just didn't think he's the devil incarnate. But
but no, there are only two options.
oh yes, I'm sorry.
Sorry, there's only two options here. Which is like a great thing that you want for your party. Let's all do that. We'll give people two options. Either you can hate this person with the fire of 1,000 suns, or you're a stand. One of those two things.
So
no room for anything in the middle there.
So what was compelling, is the idea that if no one mentions that Biden is 80, no one will notice. Like, I don't.
That's like, if I do this, I'm invisible.
And my take from when I was writing this piece was like, well, everyone knew this, right? You knew he was hella old, and you were like presenting the idea that the hella old guy was the only option against Trump. Because, and to put it in Star Wars terms, I've been watching Star Wars with my son, who of course is 8 and thinks Return of the Jedi is the best one because of the teddy bears. So he there's characters in there that if you were older and geekier, you did not like, but my son adored. I think the Ewoks. Okay. He loves them. He's like, oh wow, teddy bears, and all he could talk about was the teddy bears. And now he
so cute.
So, but Return of the Jedi ends with, the evil emperor being tossed down a mine shaft, and then of course the empire ends, and there's a big party, and everyone's happy. And I really believe that America believed it would be that simple, that you beat Trump and it's smooth sailing, and so then your 80-year-old leader is presiding over peace and prosperity. And something you'd written, I believe, back during the primaries was when Biden had said to some donors, nothing's going to fundamentally change. And I think that is true. The idea was because, let's be frank, for very wealthy donors, for those folks, the economy was going well.
Nothing's ever really going to fundamentally change for them.
But their sense was like, the economy is going fine. I like what Trump's doing in the economy. I like my tax cuts. I'm a little embarrassed that he's so racist and terrible. And I think there was a position from certain Democrats of just like, look, we're going to keep that going. The economy's still going to go great for you. We might throw through crumbs to poor people, but we're going to get rid of the racist lunatic. And they were like, okay, fine. And that was the deal. And what happened, unfortunately, was some things you couldn't have seen, some things I think you could have foreseen, which was throwing Trump down the mine shaft would not end Trumpism. Like Republicans would actually get more emboldened. They're going to be a first order attacking us. And also, you were going to get potentially, like, coming out of the economic collapse of COVID was going to result in things like inflation or rising gas prices, of course, and that's somewhat related to what's happening in Russia. So, yes, for a lot of folks, what they felt they'd committed to, they didn't get. And
Yes.
I think the Democratic argument is democracy, democracy, democracy. And I get that. I've never voted for Republican in my life. So I'm showing up. But I mean, that you were flipping voters for a specific who are going to turn because they felt like you have not delivered on everything. I get to go back to brunch and everything's fine. And I mean, that's the situation. And I do believe that is important to write about those articles of Democrats being, oh, well, what are we going to do? Because yes, now they're looking at, at 80, potentially being 82 and running. And it's not necessarily, and it's not about his being old, and it's not like an ageist comment, even though mortality is a thing. It's just that human nature is such that, the kindly grandfather and everything's going swell. That's great. That's what we want. But now everything's terrible. What's happening? Like who's gonna fight for us? Like we don't want to hear stories about cucumber sandwiches with segregationists, or how Mitch McConnell was a nice guy, or how Ronald Reagan was swell, that we're hearing from Democratic leaders when we're getting our asses kicked.
Well, because basically what it comes across is we're admitting that they're actually better than us. And, we're on that team as well, because we can't win with our own stuff. And it's just, there's always been this vibe of, like, when they're in trouble, punch left, bow right. Like, that is, I did go left. Sorry, I'm terrible at the whole left right thing. But yeah, punch left, bow right. Like, attack the people on the left, be like, we don't know them. I don't know her. And then be like, who was really great is Ronald Reagan. Like,
and we've, I go on and on about this, but as someone, I was between the ages of 6 and 14 during the 80s, or 6 or 16 during the 80s. And obviously that period of time, I was fortunate, life was good. I have relatively fond memories of that period. It's very easy to have a sort of rose-colored Marty McFly image of a period. And so there's a lot of people.
Reagan had horns.
And my family wasn't crazy about Reagan, but they weren't as political enough to be yelling about the guy every day or whatever. So if Democrats aren't hammering that, then he will get this rosy perception where he's just a challenger speech. Because if you just watch a challenger speech on YouTube with no recollection of who Reagan is, and that's hard for you probably, whatever, but without that, you will cry. It is a very beautiful, touching.
Yes, he did give lovely speeches.
Exactly. But with, when you talk about
taken directly from movies he was in.
But if you don't do that, if you don't talk about the actual kind of horrible policies, the fact that he was literally as corrupt as Trump when you come to like Iran-Contra and stuff like that, saying, I don't recall, do you remember what you did 2 years ago type comments, which is hilarious. He will. So the idea that Democrats would permit the
and how many people fucking died because he didn't want to do anything about AIDS because his party hated gay people?
That should happen during Pride. Like, if Nancy Pelosi's if she's going to be at a Reagan event in June, don't do it in June, or don't do it at all, but don't do it in June, and then don't not mention the fact, like, during Pride Month, that he is responsible literally. Yeah. And because, Jimmy Carter's a literal humanitarian, and Republicans never let up on him.
Yeah, no, they're still like, Jimmy Carter, he represents all that is evil in the world.
So
Like,
if you don't do that, then he just gets this, Reagan gets this deification. Again, I'm someone who, ready to have fond memories of the 80s. So it's easy for that to be wrapped up. And for a lot of average voters, it gets wrapped up.
I mean, Prince was great.
Yeah. But, Reagan
That
was
is my opinion of the 80s.
and you need to hammer that and to create that connection, especially when you're talking about gay rights and abortion right. The fact of like, I just don't know what the message is. So if you're talking this notion that it was all Trump, that Republicans were decent folks until Trump, is insane. It's not true. And Reagan, the shift, if you look at the shift towards embracing the white evangelicals to attacking queer people, attacking, destroying the Black middle class, all of that, it all comes from Reagan. The making anti-choice the only that was a part of the Republican platform. It's all comes from Reagan. Yeah. And when we're talking about Ginny Thomas, when people talk, that's not out of nowhere. That goes back to when her family was really into, we hate this Ford guy. He's weak. Reagan's our Phyllis Schlafly appointed, man. And so the fact that we don't kind of put that in sort of any context, it's depressing. I remember Sotomayor was giving some speech recently, Justice Sotomayor, and she's like talking about how great Clarence Thomas is and how he's very nice. He knows everyone he works with. He cares about people. And so just so we know, Clarence Thomas is a horrible human being. And like, look, if I worked with a guy,
he cares enough about them to put his pubic hairs on his hands.
I mean, I don't get it. And it just becomes this sort of the country club. It's almost like the 5th season of Angel. The idea if you start working at the evil law firm, it just consumes you, and you're suddenly like signing contracts in blood. It's like, wait a minute, is this blood? It's cool. It's yours. Like, what? How is that cool?
Refrigerator full of temperature-controlled blood.
Everything is okay now. So it just seems like
we're gonna really change things from the inside. Like
when you say it out loud, it sounds really naive. Yeah. But the idea, because Sotomayor's own dissents would indicate that Thomas does not care about people and does not care about the institution of the court. Like she's even said as much. But then it just makes it out to be like it's all just punch clock villainy. It's the only thing where he's a really nice guy and it's fine. And if there's any leverage on trying to get him to resign, forget it, or recuse himself, she just threw him this lifeline. It is the sense of the institutionalism amongst the left will doom us, like the sense of that we're all part of this country club together and we're going to help each other together.
Well, people very much like the idea of, oh, you separate the work from the person, and would like that to go both ways. Oh, they're terrible while they're working. As a guy, like, great guy, always brings, a candle when he comes to visit your house, could not be more polite. Or they're a terrible human being outside of work, but boy, do they ever do a great job at work. And it definitely does not affect the way that they treat people whatsoever. We're all that, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, Democrats have done that for a while. I mean, liberal on the left, it's not necessarily, I would say, a Democratic problem. It's more of an issue of the left. But then the 2016 election then became, oh, this guy's really personally bad. But it's like, well, you've just spent forever saying there's he's personally bad, but okay. So again, if you're in Ohio and there's no job.
Well, that was supposed to be the big deal, right? That was what was supposed to be the big deal. Like, oh, it's not just that he's bad politically, but he is a bad person entirely. And that was what was, people are supposed to, go like, oh my God.
That's never, their whole argument had been, you could separate that. Like, so if I just want a job. So what if he's saying about grabbing late, okay, he's going to give me my job. He's going to fix these problems. I don't care. Like there were whole campaign ads about how do you tell your kids that, you know, he said these bad things. Like, well, no, I'm just gonna how do I tell my kid I don't have a job because, you know, TARP can't. That's hard for me to talk to my kids about. I'm not going to talk to my kids about what the president says or whatever. And it became this sort of sense of he's very
I'm
bad.
sorry. As much as like, you know, that repulses me, but I also hated that with Clinton. Like, you know,
yeah,
no one's had to explain, like, let me tell you exactly how blowjobs happen. Okay, child. Like that was not even a thing. I hate that, you know, how do we explain this to our children? Explain to your children that he's a fucking asshole. Like that is, you know, what else do you do with that?
And it just wasn't effective. So, you know, because we've said that there's that separation, and you know, you'd written about it in 2016 and others, it's like, well, you know, how many people have had either their father or their uncle or their, you know, who they otherwise respect or care about, who's a terrible jerk like Donald Trump. He presents that way, and you sort of present these things. It doesn't.
It's a familiar archetype to some people, unfortunately.
So it is. Yeah, I don't know. The Sotomayor thing was depressing because I was just like, oh my God, like I don't know what to do. Like I feel like if all we have when it's $6 a gallon gas, all you've really got is these guys are fundamentally evil and terrible. And so
they're basically good guys.
Yeah, I don't know how this message is going to help. And I mean, we can beat up more on liberals or whatever, but that's not what's going to bring people out to. It's interesting too, because I don't think the Herschel Walker thing is going to hurt him. The fact that he has, like, I don't know what the count is of kids who aren't, especially when a lot of white liberals are kind of making.
I am not one of Herschel Walker's children, just in case.
That would be hilarious. That would be hilarious.
Turns out, no.
I just, it's weird because the son he actually is very publicly owns is terrible. So like all of the ones, I would choose him to be like, and everyone would be like, oh, we get it. That's why you don't. I wouldn't like say that this is my kid either. But the 10-year-old is kind of tough. How bad could a 10-year-old be that you don't trot him out? But the oldest one who's awful, we get that. But I mean, I hope. I've seen some bad data where like any state or district that Biden did not win by at least 10 points or more, we'd potentially lose. I hope that we can kind of target, specifically Georgia, Pennsylvania. I mean, you just can't have Dr. Oz and Herschel Walker in the Senate. That's just not, that's like in a movie, right? Like you and I make a movie like, oh, what's the most ridiculous in our satire of the future? What's the most ridiculous Senate lineup? It's like Herschel Walker. And you're like, ha ha ha. How about Dr. Oz? That's hilarious. Oh my God. And I just feel like Oprah should, like, I don't know, half her fortune should be devoted. Like she should, like, it's like, like whatever, or even 10% tithing. It should be a tithe for any involvement. And I'm not saying she's responsible as a Black woman for the awfulness of a white man, but this guy was on your show. He is famous because you gave him a platform. And so whatever you can you need to get hella political, like drop as much money as possible to register Black people or anyone who's, would not vote for Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania to make sure he is not the next senator. That would be horrifying to me.
Yeah. So. No, I doubt that she would, but it sure would be nice.
I mean, she's probably, I don't think she has much
I mean,
influence.
the way that this man is just changing his opinion on everything left and right. He's like, oh, I've been an advocate for, euthanasia for years and years and years. Nope, don't like that anymore. Totally against it. Was against it forever. And yeah, no, Fetterman is definitely doing a lot better than Oz is, which thank goodness, because that's
something I
so
had written
terrible.
about, though, is that the polls, that specific poll, had Biden up 7 points in Pennsylvania, and he won by 1 point. So if I think they're not necessarily registering Trump voters, Trump supporters very well, but it's still, if that holds, it's still he could, Fetterman.
Yeah.
I want to keep that distance so it's likely he would win. Unfortunately, Shapiro is only 4 points.
The Q people hate him, by the way.
Who? The Q
Oz.
Oz?
No,
okay. Yeah, that would help if there's,
because they think that Oprah eats children, and so they cannot be sure. And I've looked at their communications on this. They cannot be sure that he has not also eaten children. And there are pictures of him with Marina Abramovich, who is, captain in charge of the, toddler buffet, if you will. And like,
yeah, I am actually come to Darren Simmons' point. I am more comfortable about Fetterman than Shapiro, who's only 4 points ahead. And so based on some of the stuff we've seen, that might not be enough. That could be enough for an upset. And the guy, governor, is essentially, if he wins the governor, like, it's already, Trump wins Pennsylvania, because he's a big lie proponent. He's a complete fascist, Christian nationalist. So please, Pennsylvania, do not, vote for the Democrat, vote for Shapiro. That's kind of our only. It is nuts to the degree that the big liars have gotten infiltrated, just complete radicals at every kind of level. It has been scary of the past years of where they're infiltrated and where it's become mainstreamed that this is what
I think at this point there are a lot of areas where you cannot get on the Republican ballot unless you agree to it.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're like, yep, election was totally stolen by like internet geniuses in Italy where there's really great Wi-Fi all the time.
Yes, I think the perception is now they can kind of argue that, and that it's obviously fraud, because clearly, if Trump as president could stop fraud, how can he stop fraud against the sitting president? But his guys on the lower levels will be able to just steal the election outright. It's weird. I mean, the big question had been, what would so if you've been watching the January 6th hearings, the big question had been, well, what would Democrats have done if Pence if the coup had gone forward? And the answer has, like, what can we do when they're sort of helpless within our institutions, especially now where it's clear that he's guilty and he's not going to actually probably be indicted or held accountable in any way, which allows Republicans to argue that, well, he's not guilty, there is no crime or anything. Another thing I was writing about was the guy in Michigan who was arrested and charged for being involved in the insurrection, and he's now polling ahead. I mean, in the Michigan primary, I mean, against some other complete whack jobs, but he's like at 17 or 18%, and the others are below that. And it's just not disqualifying. And so the argument has to be like, how did we get to a point where we were not able to sort of say,
it's not going to be, this is the thing, it's not going to be disqualifying. It's just not, there's nothing that can be done to make it disqualifying to the people who would vote for these people. Like, it's not happening. And I do think it's important to recognize that. I'm not saying that, it's not important to have these hearings. It obviously is, but we're not going to, people aren't going to be like, well, you know what? I think that was a bad idea after all. No, they're not. They don't care because generally speaking, people do not care about the how. They only care about like what they feel is either the end result or and in their minds, the worst case scenario of that is that those people were successful, that they did, successfully get Mike Pence to overturn the election, which he can't actually do. And that is good for them. So they're like, we wouldn't lose there. And it's a problem. You have to the problem is you're not creating a scenario where they lose. And as horrifying as January 6th was, they don't see it as a situation where they lose.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to present it like that to them. And or to anyone, but I just don't think that we can count on it like we think we can.
And is there just this arguably racial or political disconnect where a bunch of white men attacking the Capitol is viewed as not a deal breaker, but women protesting quietly outside Kavanaugh's home in a 5-alarm fire?
I mean, you know, they were mad about like the, middle of the Hillary ladies in their pussy hats. Like they were like, oh my God, how could you? How could you do this? It's so crass. Like they were genuinely distraught over that on the right, if you recall. And really they're like, oh my God, they're sexualizing our children, which is their favorite thing. Of course, not that Trump does that, but they're not. These people have been hearing for decades, I think at this point, that the entire purpose of the Second Amendment is so that those people, specifically those people, because you and I are not real Americans, let's be real, can go and overthrow the government when the government is mean to them. And that is, it's been repeated over and over and over again. You see it in every, response to a pro-gun control tweet. They're like, no, we're allowed to overthrow the government. What are you talking about? And they believe that. So no, they're not that mad at it.
Yeah, I mean, the most that I think we can do as Democrats is to we can't build bridges with this party. We can't treat them as a normal party, as an insurrectionist movement. But, I keep going back to Manchin, but my favorite moment is like when he sat the Republicans at the State of the Union and sat next to Mitt Romney. And it's like, well, this is bringing the parties together. It's like, well, I'm glad you two rich white guys can get along.
It's amazing. You found a way to build a bridge.
That's what January 6th was about, was that white guys from the same country club disagreed. No, it was a bunch of angry white men out to assault women of color specifically. And it's a scary situation. I have been the same. I agree as well. Like people always say to me, well, the only thing happens is vote for Democrats, whatever. It's like, of course, the problem is you've got $6 a gallon of gas.
You can't just say that to other people. Like if someone's on the fence, you can't just be like, well, the solution is to just vote Democrat. Like I don't think it's
enough. It's not enough. You've got to, and so, we are in a tough situation. I think the best case scenario is if we keep the Senate by the skin of our teeth, that can kind of contain some of the worst damage, because Obama, it's important to remember, even in a two-party revolution, what hurt Boehner was that there was limits to what he could do that the extremists wanted, because, aside from not having the White House, the Senate was under Democratic control until only the last 2 years of Obama's administration. So a scenario where Biden, within his first term, has an even more radicalized, hostile GOP House and Senate. It's like, and I feel like I don't hear this enough of, like something Trump would do would be like, these guys, if they take power, they're going to drag my lovely daughter Ivanka through they're going to lynch, he would paint these images of what they're going to do to him personally and to his family. And I really think Biden needs to do more of that. Like, they're going to persecute my son needlessly. They're going to do nothing but they're going to impeach both me. They're going to impeach both in Harris. And I was like, well, what's the grounds? Well, you don't need grounds. They're just going to impeach. They're going to impeach Harris, probably on the border or something. I've seen once they said that they're going to impeach her because she won't do her duty to invoke the 25th Amendment.
Oh, yeah.
Biden's obviously unwell. So it's going to be a crap storm. So, I mean, if just saying vote Democratic would work, we'd say that all the time. I just think the problem is the strategy really needs to change as to how we engage with Republicans or how we engage with voters, specifically Hispanic voters. Nevada's at risk. Both the governor and that's the kind of situation we're in, because losing the governor's race in Nevada or Pennsylvania is game over, because you're going to get these big liars who are just not going to recognize even if Biden were to win. So I don't know. To wind things up on positive news. So I saw a Funny Girl. Is going to be leaving us. Is that the case?
Okay, so Beanie Feldstein and Jane Lynch are both leaving after 14 weeks, like in 14 weeks. And the rumor around town is that Leah Michelle is going to replace her, but I do not believe that is actually going to happen. Like, I really, really, really don't. There is, such that would just, people would go see it because she's good, but I still don't. I think it's some kind of bullshit. I think she floated that out there herself, even though she can't read or write. But sorry, that terrible internet joke.
Wait, is that some theory?
Yeah, it's a ridiculous. There's a conspiracy theory that I don't 100% understand. That is that Leah Michelle can't read or write, and she had to memorize her lines by people telling her them. I don't know. I don't remember exactly how it started, but you can Google it. It's a thing. So
illiterate.
What?
How could she be illiterate? Like Lauren Boebert.
It's obviously ridiculous. It's like but like it's become something of a meme and joke. But here's what bothers me about it, and I was thinking about. I know.
I'm sorry. And also, I'm just thinking of the other Ryan Murphy show, Popular. Mary Cherry bombed her her mom bombed the SATs, played by Dixie Carter. Not Dixie Carter. Who was her?
Why is it streaming?
Yeah, and Delta Burke. And Delta Burke's character explaining how she bombed the SATs. It's like, well, they give you like 200 points to just sign your name. She's like, I panicked. Yes, I should be streaming just so I can record that her delivery of that. I panicked. And so
I love Delta Burke. I really do. I've always found her very relatable.
She's hilarious. She was hilarious on Designing Women. She was hilarious on show Popular. But yes, that is one of those internet rumors that's just like, I doubt that is actually true or real.
It's basically like an internet rumor / joke. Like, I don't know that people are dead serious about it. But here's my thing, and I realized, like, I was thinking about it today, and here's, I think, why I've been like so bothered by the whole thing. And it's because we've been going through all these various waves of conversations about cancel culture or, accountability culture, where there's always this argument that, oh no, if you hold people accountable for their actions, if you hold people accountable for being racist or for masturbating in front of people with uh,
Doing a Zoom call.
or so all these things, like you hold them account, then we're not going to have any talented people left. Like,
Yes.
what are you going to do? Like, we're just going to, like, not have any culture anymore. And that's always been a thing that has, bothered me a lot, because there are so many talented people who are nice. There's no rule that you have to be a giant asshole or a racist or a, serial rapist in order to be talented. And I feel like
talented actors are nice.
Sorry, what are you saying?
A lot of talented actors are, when they talk about them, are very nice and professional, yes. And the ones that are the divas that, it's not even cancel culture. Eventually people just stop hiring them because it's like, okay, you were good on the show, but you're not worth dealing with in any
I believe that was actually what happened with Delta Burke. But look, I found Delta Burke and Jack A very inspirational as a teenager for my own reasons.
So did a lot of drag queens. We're like bringing everything around back to this thing.
So here's my thing, and this is what bothers me. I don't think that there is such a dichotomy. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I don't like the idea that, oh no, we're getting rid of all the talented people, because there are nice people. But this particular musical, it was like we were set up. It feels like a setup where, they put this person on who's, just a very nice person and so talented in other ways. I love Beanie Feldstein. I think that she is a great comedic actress. I do not think she is very good at singing. And they, put her in this position where not only is she competing with Barbara freaking Streisand, who has the greatest voice of all time, one of them, but like Barbara freaking Streisand, she's also competing with people, having to go, okay, the terrible person would have been better at this than you. Mm-hmm. And putting people in that position is kind of crappy.
Yes, it was sort of setting up that thing of like,
no, there are people, like, this is not a dichotomy. It's not an either or situation. Either they shouldn't have done, maybe don't do the show, or use someone who is very, nice, but an unknown who has an incredible voice. It's not like it's super rare to be able to sing, quite frankly. It's rare to be able to sing like Barbara Streisand, although I do a pretty good impersonation. But there are so many people out there who can sing well and act well. And if they had just gone with like one of those people, rather than, oh, we need a name, or we're going to, go with this person, it would have been fine. And all of the, stuff that won Tonys and did well in terms of musicals, most people didn't know who any of those people are.
Funny Girl did not do well at the Tonys, I presume.
It did not get anything. But I don't like feeling set up like that. And I feel like that's the way that I felt about this. Yeah. I'm like, I don't want to have to be thinking, oh, this shitty human being who is like, I don't know enough about the situation personally, but she said she was going to poop in a girl's wig. So I don't think that's,
but she probably has a lot of challenges with her illiteracy, right? So should you be a bit more understanding? Yes. And she didn't say poop. She might have meant a different word because she's illiterate. There's a whole thing of where she should probably embrace the illiteracy argument and justify everything with that. Someone trained.
Also, I will stand by the fact that Amber Riley actually had the best voice on that show. However, I don't want to be set up like that. I don't find a person who can sing, or don't do the show. Like, don't.
Barbara Streisand could sing. That is of the things that we associate with Barbara Streisand.
There are parts on Broadway in musicals with songs for people who don't sing all that well.
Yes.
There are many of them in Sondheim shows. There are, in terms of like talk singing and things like that. No one has to have a fabulous voice to do Getting Married Today. They just have to have really great breath control. Like it's not like, oh, we're discriminating against people with mediocre voices, they shouldn't be able to be in Broadway shows. Yeah, they can be, just not in that particular role. Also, I don't really want to hear people with mediocre voices sing personally. Like, I don't care enough.
Well,
there are too many people out there who do have good voices. It's my feeling.
And
maybe that's mean.
Well, I hope it's you, Robyn, instead of Leah DeMichelle. And I would obviously we can no longer do this because it's Sunday matinee situation, but it would be worth it. And I'd go out and see you in Funny Girl.
Yes.
I'm
kind of getting the haircut almost.
There, that's all. You're so close.
I know.
Thank you. I want to say that just as always, it's great talking to you. But you're sharing that Leah Michelle rumor will amuse me.
I can't believe you never heard that.
The fact that she's illiterate, that they thought that they were having to like put peanut butter on her gums, like Mr. Ed or something, to get her through scenes, is just that's a whole movie or whatever of just you and I are off screen before we're talking. I'd use the Sound of Music, not Sound of Music, Singing in the Rain, round tones of trying to teach someone to like speak it up. It was the Persuasion with Dakota Johnson. Was her accent is terrible. It's like, just do a Clueless with this. She is so modern. Her English accent is terrible. And just like, do a Clueless or something. But why are you? This is like someone had to come in and do like round tones to try. Yeah. They had to get a dialect coach who just was like, yeah, this I all I could do is you can kind of speak breathlessly. That was the way people try to do English accents, so they can't. So but yeah, so go watch the Persuasion trailer. It's terrible on Netflix, Dakota. And thank you all for joining us. Happy Father's Day for dads out there.
Happy Father's Day. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.